A nameless dog with no collar and no tags appeared out of nowhere in the middle of a deadly flood, not to be rescued, but to lead the rescuers. He didn't bark, didn't beg, just ran ahead silently, guiding them to places no one thought survivors could be. But the strangest part, no one knew where he came from. The deeper they went into danger, the more it seemed this dog didn't just find people he knew who needed help. And when he risked his life running into fire to save one final soul, the entire town fell silent. Then, as suddenly as he had come, he vanished. Was he just a dog or something more? A living legend? This story will stay with you. Not just because of what he did, but because of the look in his eyes. And it will make you wonder who was truly being saved. The rain hadn't stopped in 5 days. It fell in sheets over the lowlands, soaking fields that used to smell of corn and wildflowers, turning gravel roads into murky rivers, and the air into a heavy, humming weight. By the 6th day, the water began to swallow the town of Alder Creek from the feet up, first the basements, then the porches, then the places people thought were safe. Volunteers arrived in muddy trucks, sirens wailing, boots splashing through ankle-deep water as they carried supplies, radios crackling with urgency. Among them, unnoticed at first, came a dog. No collar, no leash. Just a German shepherd with damp fur clinging to his ribs and eyes like burning amber. He didn't bark. He didn't beg. He simply stood there, right behind the convoy, as if he had come with them. No one knew who he belonged to. No one had time to ask. The first one to notice was Marcy, a paramedic. She spotted him at the edge of the mobile medical tent, watching every move they made, not wagging, not pacing, just watching. When she tossed him a piece of jerky from her MRE pack, he caught it in midair, swallowed, and didn't take his eyes off her. Then he turned and walked away, slow but deliberate, heading toward the flooded trail behind the firehouse. Something about him, the precision of his steps, the way his ears stayed alert, made her pause. She called out to the others, and one of the search and rescue volunteers, a younger guy named Cole, followed the dog with a hunch in his gut he couldn't explain. They passed submerged fences and collapsed chicken coops, boots sucking at the mud. The dog, not hurrying, not hesitating, kept glancing back as if to make sure Cole was still behind him. Then he stopped near what looked like an abandoned house barely visible above the rising waterline. At first, Cole thought the place was empty. But then the shepherd stepped into the water without hesitation, paws disappearing beneath the muddy surface, and swam straight to the porch. He barked once, sharp and loud, then looked back. Cole squinted. There in the window, a flicker of movement. An old woman, barely able to stand, clinging to a banister with a child strapped to her chest. Her face was pale, eyes wide with a silent scream. Cole radioed in immediately. The team arrived minutes later with a raft. It took 2 men to lift the woman and the toddler from the sagging house, but they were alive, saved, and the dog, already gone, soaked fur blending into the woods again like mist. That night, word spread around the tent. Some shepherd led Cole to the house, they whispered. No tag, no owner. Just showed up. They laughed it off, calling him ghost, but not one of them denied what had happened. And when the morning came, and more townsfolk were reported missing from the outskirts, the German shepherd was there again, standing by the trucks, tail still, eyes locked ahead, like he knew exactly where to go next. No one had called him. No one fed him. But when the trucks rolled forward into deeper water, he ran ahead without looking back, paws splashing through puddles, body low and focused like a soldier with a mission. And for the first time since the storm began, someone whispered hope. Not from a headline, not from a politician, but from a nameless dog with fire in his eyes and mud on his coat, who had come from nowhere and wasn't planning to leave until the job was done. By dawn, the rain had eased, but the water kept rising, like the land was still weeping underneath. The rescue teams pushed farther out toward the eastern edge of Alder Creek, where the old farmhouses stood scattered across marshy fields. The GPS signals were spotty, and most of the road signs had disappeared underwater or been blown off their posts. Radio chatter buzzed with frustration and worry. They were losing daylight and time. Then someone said, almost too quietly to be heard, "Where's the dog?" He was already there, standing on the broken rail of a footbridge that now led to nothing but brown water and the jagged silhouette of a torn-up trail. Cole was the first to follow. No hesitation. The shepherd ghost, as they still called him, jumped from the rail and landed without a sound, trotting forward with that same unshakable focus. The others grabbed ropes, flashlights, and oxygen packs. The deeper they followed him into the woods, the quieter everything became. Trees bent under the weight of the storm, and the air smelled of rot and roots pulled too quickly from the earth. Then Ghost stopped. His ears perked. A long, low growl escaped his throat, not one of warning, but of alert. He turned off the trail, weaving through brush, stopping at a slope where a small barn lay partially submerged in the flood. No one had marked this building on the map. It shouldn't have been here. And yet, Ghost wouldn't move. His paws pressed at the waterline, whining now, ears flattening, eyes never leaving the cracked barn door. Cole stepped forward, called out. No answer. He called again. Nothing. Then a cough, faint, ragged, from inside. They rushed in, wading shoulder deep now. The wooden door gave after one hard push. Inside, stacked crates had trapped someone behind them, an elderly man, soaked through, barely conscious, his legs pinned beneath a rusted shelf. Ghost was already beside him, licking his fingers gently, whimpering. The man's eyes fluttered open, his lips forming the words, "The dog found me." They got him out. It took every bit of strength and teamwork they had, but they hauled the man onto a makeshift raft and back down the trail, Ghost swimming beside them the entire way, refusing to be carried, refusing to leave the man's side. Back at the medical tent, the story started to spread again, this time with more reverence. That dog saved him, someone said. There's no way we would have found that barn in time. Someone else nodded, quietly adding, he doesn't bark unless there's someone who needs him. Marcy, watching from across the field, noticed something strange. The dog never looked proud, never wagged his tail. He just sat under the awning, ears twitching toward every human voice like he was scanning for the next signal of trouble. That night, as wind returned and the creeks began to rumble again, the team huddled around soggy maps, trying to figure out where to go next. There were rumors of a family missing in the northern ridge, an old chicken farm now completely cut off. The road was gone. Drones couldn't reach it. Too much debris, too much risk. And then Ghost stood up, walked toward the tree line, paused, looked back. They didn't speak. They just grabbed their gear, checked their radios, and followed the shepherd into the dark, muddy unknown. Because somehow, they knew wherever he was going, there was someone waiting to be saved. The mud came up to their shins now, thick and clinging like a weight they couldn't shake off. Trees creaked around them, their roots loosened by the flood, and the sky had taken on a gray so dense it felt like dusk had fallen early. Every sound was sharper out here, the snap of a branch, the distant groan of rushing water, the steady splash of paws moving ahead with uncanny certainty. Ghost never hesitated. His movements were purposeful, threading through underbrush like he had drawn the map himself. Cole kept his eyes on the dog's back, trusting him more than the flickering GPS screen in his hand. Behind him, Marcy and two others carried rope and medical kits, ducking under low-hanging limbs as they pushed toward what had once been the northern ridge. The old chicken farm was nowhere in sight, only a field of broken fencing and a collapsed water tower jutting like a wounded limb from the floodplain. Then Ghost froze. He lowered his head, sniffed the air, and let out a deep, urgent bark, short and sharp like a warning shot. Before anyone could react, the earth trembled beneath their boots. A sound tore through the silence, like fabric ripping apart, only heavier, deeper. The levee had cracked. The team turned as one. A wall of dark water surged from the south, crashing through trees, swallowing what remained of the path behind them. Someone screamed. The current was coming too fast. Ghost darted forward, barking wildly, circling back and forth, driving them toward a narrow embankment barely visible behind a row of reeds. Cole didn't think, he just followed. They scrambled up the incline as the water slammed into the trail below, tearing it into pieces. At the top of the embankment, they dropped to their knees, panting, soaked, shaking, and then a sound they hadn't expected. A cry. Faint, human. Ghost stood at the edge of a barn half submerged under mud and debris. His paws scratched at the broken boards, tail stiff, ears forward. The team rushed over. From beneath the wreckage came the thin, frightened voice of a child. They tore at the boards with bare hands, fingers splitting on nails and splinters. Mud poured in through cracks in the walls. Time blurred. And then, at last, Cole reached in and pulled out a boy, no older than 8, bundled in a damp quilt, shivering but alive. The child clutched something in his hand, a photograph, smudged and torn, of a woman holding a baby in front of the very barn they now stood in. Behind him, tangled in rope, was a goat still breathing weakly, half drowned but safe. The boy looked at Ghost, eyes wide. He barked. "I heard him," he whispered. "That's how I knew someone was coming." Back at the base, the boy's father collapsed into sobs as they were reunited. The photo was pressed into his palm like proof that miracles existed, or at least something close to it. That night, while the others slept in shifts or dried their gear, Ghost stood watch alone. He didn't curl up or seek warmth. He just stared at the tree line as if listening for a voice no one else could hear. When Marcy brought him a blanket, he ignored it. When Cole knelt beside him and whispered, "You saved another one," Ghost didn't move. Only his ears twitched and his eyes stayed locked on the horizon. Because he knew the storm wasn't over. And somewhere out there, someone still needed him. Nightfall came early in the floodplain, but not with quiet. Lightning danced along the ridge, cracking the dark sky into shards of white as thunder rolled through the swollen trees. The rescue team had barely returned from the last mission when another call came through, faint static on the emergency radio. A woman's voice. Weak. Broken. Then gone. The coordinates didn't match any residents on their maps. It had to be a mistake, they said. An old signal. A battery dying somewhere in the flood. But Ghost stood up. He had been still all evening, eyes half closed under the flap of the supply tent. Now he rose and walked straight to the edge of the field, to the place where trucks could no longer pass. He didn't bark, didn't look back, just stood there as if waiting for someone to follow. Marcy grabbed her gear. "He knows something," she said. Cole didn't argue. He just picked up his flashlight and fell into step behind her, boots sinking into the fresh layer of water coating the land like a skin. They crossed what used to be farmland. The rain returned, not in a rush but in a steady, chilling fall that soaked through clothes and numbed fingers. Ghost led them across a narrow stream now turned fierce, leaping from one fallen trunk to another. Marcy slipped once, but Ghost was there, circling back, nudging her forward until she reached the other side. Then they saw it. An old canning shed, barely intact, with one wall missing and a metal roof bent like paper. A lantern flickered inside, casting a low, trembling light. And in the corner, cradled in damp blankets and straw, a woman knelt with a newborn pressed to her chest. She didn't cry out, didn't beg. She just looked up at them, eyes wide and hollow, lips chapped from cold and thirst. Marcy rushed to her, hands checking for pulse, for warmth, for anything stable. "She's dehydrated, weak," Marcy said. "But the baby's alive." Ghost didn't move from the threshold. Rain dripped from his muzzle, his legs coated in mud. But he didn't enter. He just stood guard. That's when Cole noticed something strange. The floor creaked with every step, groaning beneath their weight. And through a crack near the far wall, he saw the ground shifting. The shed was built on a slope, and the storm had turned the earth below it into a slow-moving landslide, ready to give. "Marcy, we've got to move now," he shouted. The woman could barely stand. The baby, limp from cold, didn't stir. Cole took the infant. Marcy hoisted the mother onto her back. But the second they crossed the threshold, the shed let out a sound like a scream. The roof collapsed behind them, and the entire structure lurched downhill. Then Ghost did something no one expected. He ran toward the falling shed, barking for the first time all night, loud, sharp, almost angry. Then he stopped, turned, and sprinted the other way, back up the slope, back toward the lights of the field camp, disappearing into darkness. At first they didn't understand, but then Cole saw it. The shallow ravine ahead was rising fast, water pooling across the only path back. They were trapped between the collapsing slope and a fast-moving stream. Minutes later, headlights appeared through the trees. A backup team had come, radioed by the others after Ghost had reached them alone, barking, soaked. His fur heavy with mud. He had led them back without hesitation. By the time Cole and Marcy reached the field again, the woman was safe, the baby bundled in blankets by the fire, breathing soft and even. Ghost stood by the entrance of the tent, his paws raw from the run, chest rising and falling in silence. When Marcy knelt beside him, he didn't move. Just leaned his head gently against her shoulder, once before stepping away again. That night they stopped calling him Ghost. They called him something else. Guardian. Because for the first time they realized he wasn't just guiding them. He was protecting them. By morning the rain had thinned to a whisper. The kind that lingers not to threaten, but to remind. Trees stood drenched and dripping like sentinels who had survived the night. The worst of the flood had passed, and though parts of Alder Creek still lay underwater, the sense of panic had begun to fade. People moved slower now, not because they were tired, but because they had finally begun to feel again. In the center of the muddy field where the rescue trucks idled, Guardian sat facing east. He didn't seem to care about food or shelter, only about the horizon. His coat, once sleek, was now matted with grime. His legs bore fresh scrapes from the night's journey. But his eyes, those unblinking amber eyes, burned with something too old to name. Cole crouched beside him, watching quietly. "You're not just a stray," he whispered. "You've done this before, haven't you?" Guardian didn't flinch, didn't blink. Just turned his head slightly as if he recognized the weight in Cole's voice. For the first time, Cole noticed the faint outline of a scar beneath the dog's left ear, a pale arc, old and half hidden beneath wet fur. He reached out, touched it gently. Guardian didn't move away, just closed his eyes for a breath, then stood up and walked toward the mess tent where the volunteers were eating in silence, too tired for words. Marcy joined Cole a few minutes later, holding a small metal tag in her hand. They found this out by the fence line. He looked like it washed in from the river. She handed it to him. It was bent, corroded, barely legible, but the engraving was still there. Ranger K9 Unit, ID 81472. The back was scratched, but one word was clear: Luke. Cole looked up at Guardian, who now lay beside the fire pit, watching the flames like they held a memory. "His name's not Ghost, not Guardian," Cole said. "It's Luke." They looked at each other in silence. Marcy sat beside him, her eyes narrowing with realization. "You think he was military?" "Maybe," Cole replied. "Or search and rescue. Someone trained him. Someone worked with him. And then—" "He got lost?" Marcy asked softly. "Or left behind?" They didn't say more. They didn't need to. The idea was enough to hollow the air between them. A dog bred to serve, trained to save, abandoned to weather in silence, and yet he kept doing what he was born for, without orders, without a voice telling him he mattered. Later that day, the rescue effort moved west, toward the edge of the town where power lines had snapped and families still huddled in second-floor rooms. Luke Guardian, whatever name he answered to, now trotted ahead like he always did, tail low, ears high, every sense sharpened. But something changed in the way he moved. He stopped more often, looked around longer. His steps seemed heavier now, as if he were searching for more than just the next person to save, as if he were waiting for something. At dusk, when the team paused near the old elementary school, a boy approached. About 12. Freckles, messy hair, eyes still wide with too much for his age. He walked straight up to Luke and dropped to his knees. "I know you," the boy whispered. "You're from the base. My dad used to take me there. You played fetch with the guys. You wore a vest." Luke didn't move. "You disappeared after the storm last year," the boy said. "They said you ran off when the floods hit." Still, the dog didn't respond. Then the boy reached into his coat and pulled out something small, a patch. Faded, torn, with a stitched word that had once read, "Luke." The shepherd leaned forward. Gently, slowly, he pressed his nose against the patch, closed his eyes, stayed there for a long moment, the boy breathing fast, not moving. Then Luke lifted his head, licked the boy's hand once, and turned back toward the trees. Not waiting, not ready to stop. Because even now, with a piece of his past returned to him, Luke understood the truth of who he was. He wasn't finished yet. The wind changed that night. It no longer howled like something wild. It whispered low and bitter, through the remaining branches and broken windows. It carried the scent of oil, mud, and something else, something metallic. Danger was shifting again, not in torrents of rain, but in the silence that followed. Luke was the first to rise. He had barely slept, if he had ever truly slept since arriving here. He circled the field perimeter 3 times before stopping at the far edge, ears forward, body frozen, tail lowered. Then he turned and ran. No warning, no hesitation. Just vanished into the thick morning fog beyond the trucks. Cole saw him go. He shouted to Marcy, then grabbed his vest and followed. His boots slid across gravel, splashing through puddles, radio clipped to his shoulder, humming with static. Behind him, 2 more volunteers joined, hearts hammering with urgency they didn't fully understand. Luke ran with purpose. Past the outskirts of town, over the flooded path where the road had split days ago. He didn't slow even as water reached his chest. He climbed through broken fences and slid down embankments, until he reached a trailer half buried in mud, teetering at the edge of what used to be a riverbank. It leaned sharply now, one corner dipping lower with each passing minute. A gas line hissed softly near the undercarriage, ready to ignite at the smallest spark. Inside, trapped against the far wall, were 2 children, siblings. A boy maybe 10, and a girl even younger, both pressed against the window, their faces pale with fear. They hadn't made a sound, they couldn't. The radio tower nearby had fallen days earlier. No signals came out here. No one even knew the trailer was still standing. No one but Luke. He barked, loud and sharp, paws scratching at the metal door. The boy inside moved to the window and pounded back. Cole and the others arrived seconds later, breathless, soaking wet. One glance was enough. The trailer groaned again, shifting deeper into the mud. The girl screamed. They moved fast. Ropes were tied to the nearest tree. Cole kicked at the back door until it buckled. Gas hissed louder. Something sparked beneath the floor. Then Luke dove inside. Through the narrow gap, straight toward the children. Cole yelled after him, but it was too late. Inside, the heat had started to build. The girl coughed, eyes fluttering. Luke reached her first, nudging her gently with his nose, then barked again, short and urgent, urging the boy to follow. Cole reached through, grabbed the girl, pulled her out. One of the team scooped up the boy. The air inside cracked with tension. The mud outside shifted again. "Luke, get out!" Cole shouted. But the dog didn't move. Not yet. He turned toward the far corner. One more life. A kitten, huddled behind a crate, soaked and shivering. Luke didn't hesitate. He darted forward, took the tiny animal in his mouth gently, carefully, and turned just as the trailer gave its final groan. The explosion was small, but the fire fast. The team scrambled backward as flames burst from the base. For a moment, they couldn't see through the smoke. Then, through the firelight, Luke emerged limping, singed, but still standing. He dropped the kitten at Cole's feet, then collapsed beside it, chest heaving, eyes barely open. Marcy threw her jacket around him. Someone ran for medical supplies. The children cried not from fear, but from the realization that they were alive. And Luke, scarred, breathless, half-burned, licked the kitten once before closing his eyes, not from pain, but from peace. Because he had made his choice. Not just to survive, but to protect. The fire had long burned out by the time dawn arrived, but smoke still curled lazily over the scorched frame of the trailer, mixing with the mist that clung to Alder Creek, like the final sigh of the storm. The rivers had begun to fall back into their beds, no longer raging but dragging debris as along their slow retreat. What remained in their wake were scars, deep cuts in the land, and deeper ones in the people. Luke lay beneath a wool blanket at the edge of the field hospital. His left side was bandaged where the heat had blistered his skin, and his front leg, the one he'd used to push himself out of the collapsing trailer, now trembled every time he tried to stand. But he never whined. Not once. When the children came to see him that morning, he lifted his head slowly, tail tapping the earth twice, then stilled again. The girl, now wrapped in clean clothes and holding a small toy someone had found for her, leaned close and whispered something into Luke's ear. No one heard what she said, but Luke closed his eyes, and for a long time he didn't open them again. Word of the rescue had spread overnight. People who had barely spoken in years now stood in small clusters outside the relief tents, asking for updates, offering help, leaving food not for the volunteers but for Luke. A shoebox of thank you notes appeared beside his resting place. Someone placed a hand-painted sign on a stick beside him. It read, "Our hero." But Luke didn't seem to notice. He wasn't resting for attention. He was listening the way he always had to something only he could hear. Marcy sat with him through the afternoon, gently dabbing at his paw pads with a soft cloth. She said nothing, and he didn't need her to. But when she thought he had fallen asleep, she whispered, "You're not just saving people, are you? You're saving parts of us we forgot how to hold on to." He blinked once. That was enough. Cole returned that evening, holding a small tin box that had been delivered by a veteran from a neighboring town. It had belonged to a retired K-9 handler, a man named Hector Rains, who had passed away the year before. The tin held dog tags, training photos, and a single note written in a shaking hand. It read, "If he finds his way to you, treat him gently. He's seen more than any of us, but he never quits. He's not just a good dog. He's the kind of soul that carries others through the fire." The note ended with a name, Luke. They read the letter out loud at sunset as the team stood in silence. No one said what they were all thinking, that maybe Luke hadn't just found them by chance. Maybe he had been looking for one last place to serve, one last storm to walk into, one last fire to cross. That night, Luke stood up for the first time since the explosion. He walked slowly, a limp in his front leg now permanent, but he walked. He stopped by the fence line, lifted his nose to the wind, and stood there for minutes, silent, watching. And then he lay down in the grass, still and alert, like a soldier keeping watch in a world that no longer saw him but still desperately needed him. The sun rose over Alder Creek for the first time in 10 days without hiding behind clouds. Its light wasn't harsh or triumphant. It was soft, a golden hush settling on rooftops, glinting off puddles that no longer threatened, but only shimmered. For the people of the town, it felt like breathing for the first time after holding their chests too long. Luke stood beneath the old cedar tree at the edge of the camp, the wind brushing through his fur like fingers through tall grass. He no longer ran. He didn't need to. His work was done. Children came to sit beside him in the mornings, their small hands resting on his back, their voices low like they were speaking to someone sacred. He never moved away. He let them speak, and maybe that was his final gift, the quiet that made others feel heard. Marcy took a photo of him that morning. Not a posed one. Just Luke in the light, eyes on the distance, ears still sharp even as his body leaned a little heavier into the earth. She printed it later and pinned it inside the local firehouse, beside a sign that read, "When you're lost, follow the silence. He'll be there." Cole built a small platform just past the flood line, where the water had crested highest. He didn't make it grand. Just a wooden beam with a name carved deep into the grain. Luke. Below it, 3 simple words, no badge, no leash, just heart. What none of them spoke aloud was that Luke still returned to the woods each evening. Just before dusk, he would rise from his spot and walk always toward the ridge, always along the same path. He never disappeared completely, but he never stayed overnight. It was as if something in him still listened for voices no one else could hear, still scanned the air for distress too faint for radios to catch. One night, a family returned to their damaged home and found a trail of muddy paw prints across their porch. At the end of the prints was a child's doll lost in the flood, placed gently beside the front door. They never saw who left it, but they knew. A month later, when the town held its first post-flood gathering in the schoolyard, Luke was there. He didn't approach the crowd. He stayed at the edge, watching. Someone played music. Children laughed again. An old man wept into his hands, not from grief, but from the way hope sounded when it started to return. And Luke turned, slowly, and walked back into the trees. No one followed. They understood. Some heroes stay. Some simply show the way, and then vanish into the places only they belong to. But Alder Creek never forgot. Years later, when new floods came to other towns, stories spread of a shepherd with a torn ear and eyes like flame, who appeared in the rain and vanished before anyone could thank him. Some say it was just folklore, just legend. But those who had sat beside him under the cedar tree knew better. He was real. He had no name when he arrived. But when he left, he had all of theirs. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this story. If it moved you, made you think, or simply touched something in your heart, we hope it stays with you for a long time. Stories like this remind us that sometimes the quietest heroes leave the deepest marks. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss future stories that inspire and heal. And if you have thoughts, feelings, or your own experiences to share, we'd love to hear from you in the comments below. Your voice matters here.